Under the glowing lights of the United Nations Assembly, history was about to be written. The chamber was silent, but the tension was undeniable. The world had gathered, expecting another routine session. What they got instead was something no one would forget. A young African leader stood alone against a wall of global power. They told him to apologize. They tried to silence his voice, but his reply carried the weight of a continent's pain, pride, and defiance. And when he finally spoke, the entire assembly froze. What made his words so powerful that even the UN could not ignore them? Ibrahim Traoré was not born into power. He did not inherit wealth, nor was he raised with the privileges of global elites. He came from the soil of Africa, its struggles, its hopes, its relentless fight for dignity. As a soldier, and later as a leader, he carried the scars of a people who had been silenced for too long. In his rise, there was no comfort, only resistance against forces far greater than himself. He represented not just Burkina Faso, but millions across the continent who had long been treated as pawns in the games of the powerful. To the world, he was young and unpolished. To his people, he was a symbol of defiance. The chamber that day expected compliance. They had seen many leaders before him bend under the weight of pressure, but there was something different in his eyes, something unyielding. And as the assembly waited for his apology, no one could predict what was about to unfold. It began with the whispers of disapproval. The Western powers demanded his silence. They accused him of stepping beyond his place, of challenging the order that had long been established. For decades, African nations had been lectured, pressured, and bound by agreements written far from their lands. Traore dared to break that pattern. He spoke of exploitation, of resources stolen under the cover of diplomacy. He spoke of young men and women forced into poverty while their lands enriched others. His words cut deep, and those who benefited from this system could not allow them to spread. Behind closed doors, officials leaned on him. They told him to apologize, to retract his statements, to show respect to the assembly. It was not the first time an African voice was pressured into silence, but Traoré was not like the others. The tension escalated as the session drew near. Diplomats whispered that he would cave, that the pressure was too heavy for such a young leader. But those who knew his journey understood he had faced greater battles. He had walked through villages where children went hungry. He had seen soldiers bury their brothers under a foreign fight. And he had felt the sting of watching his homeland treated as disposable. Each injustice became a flame inside him. And by the time he stood before the UN, that flame had become a fire. When he finally rose to speak, the chamber was still. Cameras rolled, pens hovered over paper, and every eye was fixed on the man they believed they could silence. The climax came in the thunder of his words. He did not apologize. Instead, he stood taller than ever before. He told them that Africa was not a child to be scolded. He told them that his people had endured centuries of theft, humiliation, and silence, but no longer. His voice was steady, his tone unwavering. He reminded them that the assembly was supposed to represent justice, yet it had turned a blind eye to the exploitation of an entire continent. Every sentence carried the weight of generations, and the more he spoke, the quieter the room became. Some looked away, others shifted uncomfortably, but none dared to interrupt. By the end of his speech, there was no applause, only silence, the kind of silence that comes when truth can no longer be denied. His reply had stunned the assembly. When Traoré left that chamber, he carried with him more than the defiance of a single man. He carried the dignity of millions who had long been silenced. His words echoed far beyond those walls, reaching villages, cities, and nations across Africa. For some, he became a hero. For others, a threat. But no one could deny the impact of what had happened. The UN had tried to force an apology, but instead, they received a mirror reflecting their own failures. His fiery reply became a rallying cry for unity, a reminder that Africa's future would no longer be dictated by outside voices. And as his words spread, They sparked a question that still lingers today. How many more leaders will rise to speak with such courage? And what will happen when Africa's silence is finally broken forever? Which story do you believe history will remember, the silence they demanded, or the voice that refused to be silenced?